In the spring, I would be hiking. In the summer, I'd be farming. In the fall, I would go back to hiking. And then in the winter, I would be skiing.
You're making it so obvious that somebody's making you say it. You're not.
Yeah, they do. All right. I'm trying to
Inappropriate.
I'm trying to talk about informal likeness. Leaders have this, they want to fill the silence. Silence is a good thing. Sometimes it's best to stop talking and just listen. Leadership comes from sometimes being the softest, but being the most deliberate voice in the room. I am not active on social media. I know, I'm sorry, I knew this was gonna, social media, if you can even consider it social media that I'm active on is LinkedIn. Consider it, yeah, it's just, you're like crying over here. It's acceptable by you? I like this. Fine, you wanna start over on that one? And a lot of people said, even though you were the COO for a number of years and you were this for a number of years, you have no idea what's coming. In high school, I was the manager of a gas dock, which is essentially how boats fill up gasoline. There's a dock at the end of a pier, and the boat comes in, and you fill it up, and I was a manager of a gas dock for like 2 years. My parents instilled lots of great values in me. They were fortunate to put me into great schooling. You know, if I wanted a car, I had to pay for my own insurance, I had to pay for my own gas, and so I wanted a car and I wanted to do all those things, and I wanted to go with my friends, and so I guess I needed a summer job. I needed a winter job. I needed an everyday job. And then in college, I worked at law firms. I worked at a number of different law firms because I thought I wanted to be a lawyer actually in life. It didn't turn out that way, obviously. I'm here today, so not a lawyer. And then my first job out of college was actually in marketing of all things. I got really into digital marketing for a long time, and then the rest is history. The startup. Yeah, absolutely. The startup grew out of a problem I was having while being a marketing director at Pearson Education. Funny enough, I called a competitor of mine, a competitor of business, but a friend of mine who worked at that competitor and said, hey, do you have the same problem? And he said, I do actually. So what we created was the first institutionalized system for collecting what's called point of sale data. So when you go to a cash register and you check out, that's the point of sale. And so we were the first group that collected point of sale data for textbooks around the United States. And so we got every college to send us information every night, all programmatically through APIs, and we would roll this up to understand what you were selling, where you were selling it, and how you were selling it. And it actually became very successful. So we sold it to a company, and then my partner left. It's like what happens many times in a startup. He left, and I stayed on for 2 years to help transition the product, and then I left. Yeah, it was a fun time. It was a different time, but it was a fun time. Much as I'd like to sound like there was a plan, I think the reality is the path to your career is never a straight line. It's always one that meanders. And I think the skill that helps people excel in that meandering line is the ability to not necessarily worry so much about the details, but take the opportunities that are in front of them. Am I in the right place at the right moment versus focusing on how do I make the most of this moment? I'm a risk taker in general, so for every moment for me, it was very easy to say like, oh, let's go take that risk, let's go take that opportunity. And I didn't stress on being like, well, is this the right, like, let me look at my life board, is this the right moment at the right time? I said, well, I guess this is the moment that I'm in right now, and so how do I try to get the most out of this moment? I continue that today, even as it's transitioned to being a CEO. I had an interview for the position. I spoke to every board member multiple times, did some outside interviews as well, and a lot of people said, even though you were the COO for a number of years and you were this for a number of years, you have no idea what's coming. And I really thought back to like when I first became a parent. You know, you don't really know what life is like. It's funny, the second the kid happens, you don't know what life was ever like without the kid. But you can really get down on yourself every day and question, are you doing the right things, are you doing the wrong things, or you can just accept the moment that you're in and try to do the best you can. It's always one step at a time. Even the biggest problem can be solved one step at a time. Well, I think I'm kind of different than that guy these days. But I would, especially as I came into my first professional jobs, I would have given myself the advice to listen louder than I speak. People believe leadership comes from being the loudest voice in the room. And I think I'm learning more that leadership comes from sometimes being the softest, but being the most deliberate voice in the room. Listening more to the voices around you to make the best decisions, because the best decisions, just like the best food you cook, doesn't come from a single ingredient. It comes from the blending of many ingredients. Sometimes it's best to stop talking and just listen. Was I a talker when I was growing up? No, actually not really, because so on Myers-Briggs, I'm actually they would score me as an introvert. I'm a hardcore INTJ all day long. But I think leaders have this, they want to fill the silence. I actually think the silence is a good thing. Silence allows someone else to step into the role of the speaker.
Extrovert to not only be a leader.
I was talking to the interns about this actually. I learned this a lot from my wife. I think that the best leaders are ones that spend a lot of time thinking about how they want to show up for the world and how they want to show up for themselves and how they want to handle situations and how they want to think, whether it could be strategy or whether that could just be tactics or whether that could be just how do you want to show up for yourself. And I think the best leaders do a lot of that. And I think I was talking to these interns, I was like there's so much, our interns young college students spend so much time evaluating themselves versus their peers. And I'm like, how about you spend more time just evaluating yourself against yourself? Like write your goals down, write your expectations down, and spend a lot of time getting really comfortable in your head, which is actually sometimes people think it's a very uncomfortable place to be. But the more you do it, it's like any practice. The practice of meditation is a great example. The more you do it, the more comfortable you get with it. But the first time you sit down to meditate, it's actually a really uncomfortable thing. And the first time I meditated, I couldn't sit still for 5 minutes. Now I can do it for 30, 45 minutes easy, right? And it feels like it was a 5-minute long session. So I think the more you spend getting really comfortable with yourself and really honest with yourself, I think the better leader you can be.
First
It's
is,
gonna be one, it can't be all of them?
no,
Okay.
has to be one.
Not the last one, I can tell you that. I think the middle one is one I would love to say that would be the thing I wanted. I really admire people that have that creative, like that bone, that creative ability. I really like it. That's why I look at people like Chuck and Dana, and Chuck on the innovation side and Dana on the creativity and development side and building side. And I completely admire the way they approach problems. I think creative people approach problems really, really interesting, really, really well. But I think the thing I would love to, and I continue wanting to strive to excel at, is that leadership skill. And the why isn't because I personally want to be great at it, but because I see great leaders form great teams and great relationships with people, and they make the collective better. And that's a real, like that kind of gets me up in the morning of like, that's a really cool thing to say, like not how do I get the best out of people, but how do I create the best environment for people to thrive? And that is a really powerful thing for me. Yeah, and I said it because I think a lot of people, they just assume management is the way they have to go. It's just the path, right? And I think there's actually a lot of paths today, and management doesn't just mean to me, management to me is personal. It doesn't mean that you're just that person's manager for the job in front of them, but because there's never a day that you come to work where life doesn't also impact the way you're working, right? Things at home, things personally, things in your head, and manager's job is to help support that person, the whole body of this person. Like we talk about the student being whole body support. Well, as a manager, you have to think about it as being a whole body manager, and that that can be tiring, it can be exhausting. It also can be incredibly rewarding. And so I just think about it as, how do I show up to be that authentic and compassionate and empathetic manager? And that, I think it just takes a lot of time and skill and a lot of thought and a lot of preparation. And it's just something I don't take lightly. I want to meet my employees' kids and their spouses, because I want to know I want to know the other influences in their life. And so I don't take it as like, I'm just going to show up and give you your focal and say, hey, great job. I'm actually going to care about you. And I'm actually going to be there, whether it's in the job or in life. So that's something that I think is important as a manager, and isn't a day job. It's an every hour job. So. Oh, that's a tough one. Dan was a phenomenal mentor for me, and still remains to be. I mean, he's our executive chair. We talk still many times a week. I get a ton of advice from him, but I actually like to create a network of, I actually call them truth sayers. People who you don't work with, but know enough about you that you can talk about work, and they can give you a perspective that is fresh eyes. There's a woman named Jane Creech. She's been my mentor in many ways, and my teacher, my coach for about a decade. And she's just a phenomenal woman and a phenomenal leader. She's taught me so much, because she's taught me sometimes your direct boss, you're very myopic in the problems because you're trying to solve it just for that business and just for that thing. And the people who are outside a little bit, but still understanding the situation, they can give you another perspective. I am not active on social media. I know, I'm sorry. I knew this is gonna, it's funny. So one of our board members is Marnie Levine. Well, as I took the job as CEO, she called me and said, like, give me all your information on Instagram and Meta. And I was like, I'll stop you right there. And she was like, what do you mean? What? I was like, I don't have an account. She's like, what? There is a Facebook account out there, but I haven't been on it in like a decade. And Instagram, I had an account for a hot second, and I was like, I have no use for this. So social media, the only social media, if you can even consider it social media, that I'm active on is LinkedIn. But I don't really consider it. Yeah, it's just, you're like crying over here. You got to remember, I'm 47. Yeah, so I am not very active on social media. I mean, I got a lot to do. You thought you knew all the answers that were coming, didn't you?
Sort of.
So I do think that everyone at this company, and many companies I've worked at, everyone kind of starts and really has benevolent intentions with their decisions and their actions. As an individual contributor, I remember back in some of my jobs, I used to question a lot, like, why was my boss acting that way? And I really overthought it. I was thinking more about how it impacts me versus like, why do they make that decision? What's going on in their life? I think as an employee, I think having the mindfulness that the decisions that are being made aren't necessarily personal. They are most likely made with the best of intentions. Let's care, but not take it too personally. So I would say for ICs, try and do the best we can.
If you could have only 3 apps on your phone, what would they be?
Apple Music, New York Times, and my fitness apps.
You don't need a phone app? To call somebody? Or like,
I mean, the phone doesn't use an app to do that. The phone does that.
That's also an app though.
Is it really?
Yeah. But you lost it. You'd have 3. You're not going to call anybody.
That's actually better. I don't want to talk to anyone who is. Just kidding.
If you had 2 extra hours in your day, what would you do with them?
I'd work out more, and I would spend more time with my family.
So if you had to pick a superpower? The ability to predict the future accurately,
Okay.
the ability to learn any skill instantly, or the ability to influence people's decisions.
Oh, the skill instantly.
If you had to let one form of entertainment go, which would it be? Movies, books, or music?
That's impossible. My life would change utterly. Had to?
Yeah.
Movies.
The last movie you watched.
I watched this one called One Life. Oh my God, I was crying the whole time. It was miserable. Like, the woman on the airplane actually came and gave me a box of tissues. I was so embarrassed. I was like,
Would you rather watch a 10-hour-long movie starring your least favorite actor or attend a 10-hour-long concert of an artist you cannot stand?
yeah, that was easy. I would watch the movie all day long.
Yeah?
Yeah, I mean the music I don't like. No, it's like nails on a chalkboard.
So if you could travel to just one place every year, what would it be?
Tokyo, Japan.
No, that was easy.
It's amazing.
You don't have to answer it in one line. It can be
Okay.
over two.
Well, this was rapid fire. You're telling me the rules over here.
If the concept of money did not exist, what would you be doing?
Depends on the season.
Oh,
Okay.
okay. Tell us more.
Yeah, absolutely. In the spring, I would be hiking in amazing places. In the summer, I'd be farming and growing stuff because I love doing that. And in the fall, I would go back to hiking, and then in the winter, I would be skiing. And I would be a ski bum the entire winter. Acceptable by you? I like
Yeah,
this.
absolutely.
I gotta go back and do this whole thing over again.